There's always been corruption in politics. Kings have schemed, tyrants have taken over, nations have risen and fallen in bloodshed. But there have been times when humanity was taught to believe in higher ideals. The Western Enlightenment, for example, lifted up words like justice, equality, and the rule of law. However imperfectly practiced, these ideals set a standard. Leaders had to at least give a nod to them. Today, even the pretense is fading. Presidents and prime ministers justify raw power as a law unto itself. Assassinations are ordered with a pen. Genocide is excused as security. What was once hidden in shame is now flaunted in public with applause. The erosion of law doesn't begin in parliaments or palaces. It begins when the divine standard is broken, first in human hearts, then in human institutions. When the ancient Israelites turned from their covenant, the result was not only spiritual decline, but invasion, exile, and the collapse of their nation. In this age, that safeguard was the Covenant of Bahá'u'lláh, the charter of God's plan for humanity. When the leaders nearest to it turned away, they set in motion consequences that reached far beyond religion, reshaping the course of nations. The years leading to 1963 were critical in this regard. Those entrusted with the leadership of God's revelation for our day abandoned their trust. They violated the covenant, the shield ordained to protect the law of God. Instead of upholding the testament, they raised their own creation, a false universal house of justice, elected in defiance of sacred decree. This was not a minor religious squabble. It was the forsaking of divine law, and the consequences could not be confined to the Baha'i world. What happens in the spiritual realm inevitably spills into the world. Within months of the election of that false Baha'i institution, the U.S. president was gunned down in broad daylight. The crime was buried beneath official lies, a story crafted to close the case and silence dissent. This mirrored the violation within the Baha'i faith, when the throne of David faced its own assassination attempt and the search for truth was smothered. The decades since 1963 have only deepened the descent of the United States into an empire of controlled chaos. Once the veil of legality was torn in the highest places, assassination, intrigue, and mass manipulation increasingly became the hidden tools of statecraft. Raw power began to speak more loudly than law. And here is the deeper tragedy. It was in this land, the United States of America, that God chose to send the return of Jesus as high priest in the person of Dr. Leland Jensen. Why here? Because this nation had cultivated a tradition of law, of liberty, of freedom of conscience, and freedom of speech. It was a land where, at least in theory, truth could be proclaimed without fear of state reprisal. But now, even these freedoms are at risk. Dissent silenced, privacy invaded, and due process denied. The very rights that once made this land the cradle of a divine promise are being dismantled before our eyes. Now, genocide is live-streamed and this government arms the perpetrators. Leaders speak of annihilating entire populations, while sycophants and hirelings cheer them on in the name of God. There was a time when lawlessness could still be resisted. When the Axis powers threatened the world, a force arose to confront and defeat them. But today, the lawless advance almost unchecked. Institutions are hollow, resistance fragmented, and those who ought to lead have lost the moral courage to act. This descent was neither random nor inevitable. Abdu'l-Baha warned of it when he wrote in his will and testament, "By the shield of his covenant hath he guarded the temple of his cause. By the hosts of his testament hath he preserved the sanctuary of the most beneficent law, restraining thereby the onslaught of the company of covenant breakers." The covenant is the shield that protects the law of God. Once that shield was cast aside, the law itself became vulnerable. And when divine law is forsaken, human law soon follows. Humanity stands at a threshold. From the covenant's betrayal in the 1960s to assassinations, coups, and wars, each decade has sunk deeper. Now civilization itself is at stake. The choice is stark: fidelity or betrayal, covenant or chaos. To return is to find unity and justice. To refuse is to face catastrophe without precedent. For more, go to schooloftheland.com.